The moment the officer hit the cobblestones on her knees, the street seemed music to freeze because authority doesn't usually look helpless, and fear music doesn't usually show on a trained face, but it was there now, sharp and undeniable, music, as the rich young man laughed and lifted his polished shoe, bringing it down hard against the ribs of the canine lying beside her, and the sound that came from the dog's chest wasn't a bark or a growl. It was a broken, painful music, breath that cut through the air like a scream no one expected to hear. People were watching, phones half raised, unsure whether to record or run, while two men in expensive suits held the female officer by her arms, not arresting her, but restraining her, smiling as if this was entertainment, and she struggled, tears streaking down her face, not because she was afraid for herself but because her partner, her dog, trained to protect and obey, was being punished for doing exactly that. Before we begin, don't forget to hit like, repost, or share and subscribe. And I'm really curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Back to the story. The canine tried to roll, tried to shield its head, claws scraping uselessly against the stone, eyes locked on the officer with a loyalty so deep it hurt to witness. And the man delivered another kick, slower this time, deliberate, enjoying the power of knowing no one dared stop him because his last name carried weight, because his father owned half the city, because consequences had never applied to him. The officer shouted for help, her voice cracking as she begged them to stop, reminding them that the dog was a service animal, a sworn partner. Please stop. He's a service dog. He's my partner. Please, you can't do this. But her words dissolved into laughter, and one of the suited men leaned down and whispered something cruel in her ear, something about knowing the mayor, something about how complaints disappear. That was when the sound changed, when heavy boots struck the ground behind them, fast and controlled, not rushed, not panicked, but purposeful, and the laughter faltered because confidence collapses quickly when it meets something stronger. A man in civilian clothes moved through the small crowd, like a blade through water, calm eyes, squared shoulders, his posture carrying the unmistakable weight of someone who had lived through chaos and learned how to master it. And behind him, sprinting hard, was another figure in uniformed camouflage, but it was the first man who stopped everything without raising his voice. Step away from the dog, he said, low and steady, not loud enough to draw attention but strong enough to command it. And for a split second the rich young man hesitated, not because he respected the law but because instinct recognized danger before ego could argue. The young man scoffed and turned, sneering, asking who the hell he was supposed to be, lifting his foot again, as if to prove no one controlled him. And that was the moment the veteran's eyes hardened, because he had seen this look before on battlefields far from this clean street, on men who thought power made them untouchable. The Navy SEAL didn't move fast for show, didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply stepped in, placing himself between the raised foot and the injured canine, and the space around them changed the way it does when something final is about to happen. and the crowd finally understood that this story was no longer about money or influence but about lines you never cross. The moment the Navy SEAL stepped forward, the rich young man laughed. Again, louder this time, trying to drown out the sudden tension tightening the street. Because men like him had learned that noise often scared people into backing down. But this man didn't flinch, didn't blink, and didn't move an inch. His eyes locked onto the attacker with a calm that was far more frightening than anger. "You don't want to do this," the SEAL said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience, the kind earned in places where mistakes cost lives, not reputations. And that was when the young man's confidence cracked just enough to show fear underneath, though he quickly masked it with arrogance, sneering and calling out his father's name like a shield. The SEAL didn't care about names. He cared about actions. And before the next kick could land, he caught the man's ankle midair and twisted. Not violently, not recklessly, but with surgical precision, dropping him hard onto the stones as pain exploded across his face, and the laughter died instantly, replaced by shocked gasps from the crowd. The suited men rushed forward, but they froze when the second figure arrived. The camouflage-clad Navy man, drawing his sidearm just enough to make the message clear without a single word. And suddenly the balance of power flipped, because bullies only thrive when no one stands up to them. The female officer scrambled forward, ignoring her own bruises, pulling the canine close as the dog whined softly, tail barely moving, blood visible along its side. And she whispered reassurances through tears, her hands shaking as she checked 4 broken ribs, while the SEAL knelt beside them, removing his jacket and gently pressing it against the dog's injuries. Sirens approached fast. Real authority this time. And when uniformed officers poured onto the scene, the story unraveled quickly, phones now fully raised, footage already spreading. Because truth travels faster when courage opens the door. The young man screamed threats even as he was cuffed, promising consequences, promising lawyers, promising revenge. But none of it mattered anymore, because cameras don't forget and witnesses don't unsee what cruelty looks like in daylight. As medics lifted the canine onto a stretcher, the dog turned its head just enough to look back at its handler, eyes tired but trusting, and the officer broke down completely, clutching Thesiel's arm in silent gratitude, unable to find words big enough to match what he had done. Later, as the street emptied and justice settled in quietly, the SEAL walked away without waiting for praise, because heroes like him never do. And behind him, an officer kept her partner alive. A city learned a lesson it couldn't buy its way out of. And one powerful family discovered that there are still people in this world who don't care who you are, only what you do. This story touched millions of hearts. If it touched yours, let us know with a like, comment, yes, and subscribe or follow for more amazing stories like